Today is day 5 for the Come Follow Me study for this week, November 25th through December 1st. By faith, all things are fulfilled. Ether 12 through 15. Friday, November 29th, 2024, Ether 14 and 15. You are about to read one of the most tragic portions of the Book of Mormon. These chapters contain an account of the final destruction of a whole civilization. In some ways, it is depressing to read of the utter depths of depravity to which the people had sunk. When we read that even women and children were armed and sent into battle. When we read of people so weary that they slept, but only to continue the warfare the following day. When we read that finally all were killed except the prophet Ether, who witnessed it all, and only one other survivor, then one cannot help but marvel at the wickedness of this people. And yet Moroni, under inspiration, included this history for our day. As you read of the last tragic days of the Jaredites, ask yourself, what lessons are there in these chapters for me and the generation in which I live? Coriantumr battles against secret combinations and the armies of Shiz. Elder Neal A. Maxwell said, in contrast to Ether's righteousness, Shiz and Coriantumr, Ether's contemporaries, are classic examples of ruthless military rivals who finally reached the point where they did not care for their own lives or for the lives of their people. Shiz was the brother of Lib, a previous military leader who was killed by Coriantumr's forces. Our first encounter with Shiz in the scriptures introduces his insensitivity, for he did slay both women and children, and he did burn the cities. We see in the rivalry of Shiz and Coriantumr, as in other Book of Mormon episodes, an awful cycle of family vengeance. Those who are caught up in revenge lose all perspective concerning the sanctity of life. Shiz swore to avenge himself upon Coriantumr of the blood of his brother. That Shiz was an intimidating individual is made perfectly clear by the quailing question, who can stand before the army of Shiz? There are some lyrical lines from a 20th century musical, Kismet, that remind us all of the transitory nature of human power as seen in men like Shiz and Coriantumr. Princes come, princes go, an hour of pomp, an hour of show. There are some men at arms who, unlike Shiz and Coriantumr, learn from war and can distill immense important lessons from the terrors of war. One such modern man was Douglas MacArthur, General of the United States Armies and veteran of these great wars. In May of 1962, at age 83, he spoke movingly and eloquently, without notes of any kind, to young soldiers at West Point. Significantly, General MacArthur noted in his benedictory address some of the things he had distilled from his experiences in 20 campaigns on 100 battlefields, around 1,000 campfires, such as how we must master self before we seek to master others, how important it is to have a heart that is clean, how divine help is needed to sustain the soldier, and of right and wrong. Reading of Shiz and Coriantumr, one has difficulty envisioning them learning such lessons from their many battles. As he recounted the lessons of life he had learned amid the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield, General MacArthur also spoke of the judgment seat of God, and of man's being created in the image of God. While the soldier pines for peace, MacArthur knew human nature well enough to cite Plato's comment that only the dead have seen the end of war. The senseless slaughter of which Shiz was a part is described with poetic vividness. The armies marched from the shedding of blood to the shedding of blood. Chapter 14. The iniquity of the people brings a curse upon the land. Coriantumr engages in warfare against Gilead, then Lib, and then Shiz. Blood and carnage cover the land. Ether 14, 1-2. And now there began to be a great curse upon all the land because of the iniquity of the people, in which if a man should lay his tool or his sword upon his shelf or upon the place whither he would keep it, behold, upon the morrow he would not find it. So great was the curse upon the land. Wherefore every man did cleave unto that which was his own, with his hands, and would not borrow, neither would he lend. And every man kept the hilt of his sword in his right hand, in the defense of his property and his own life, and of his wives and children. The first presidency said, we are not given the step-by-step backsliding of this Jareditic civilization till it reached the social and governmental chaos the record sets out, but those steps seem wholly clear from the results. Put into modern terms, we can understand them. First, there was a forsaking of the righteous life and the working of wickedness. Then must have come the extortion and oppression of the poor by the rich. Then retaliation and reprisal by the poor against the rich. Then would come a cry to share the wealth, which should belong to all. Then the easy belief that society owed every man a living, whether he worked or not. Then the keeping of a great body of idlers. Then, when community revenues failed to do this, as they always have failed and always will fail, a self-helping by one to the goods of his neighbor. And finally, when the neighbor resisted, as resist he must, or starve with his family, then death to the neighbor and all that belonged to him. This was the decreed fullness of iniquity. Ether 14, 3-31. And now, after the space of 2 years, and after the death of Shared, behold, there arose the brother of Shared, and he gave battle unto Coriantumr, in which Coriantumr did beat him, and did pursue him in the wilderness of Achish. And it came to pass that the brother of Shared did give battle unto him in the wilderness of Achish, and the battle became exceedingly sore, and many thousands fell by the sword. And it came to pass that Coriantumr did lay siege to the wilderness, and the brother of Shared did march forth out of the wilderness by night, and slew a part of the army of Coriantumr, as they were drunken. And he came forth to the land of Moron, and placed himself upon the throne of Coriantumr. And it came to pass that Coriantumr dwelt with his army in the wilderness for the space of 2 years, in which he did receive great strength to his army. Now the brother of Shared, whose name was Gilead, also received great strength to his army because of secret combinations. And it came to pass that his high priest murdered him at his seat upon his throne. And it came to pass that one of the secret combinations murdered him in a secret pass, and obtained unto himself the kingdom. And his name was Lib, and Lib was a man of great stature, more than any other man among all the people. And it came to pass that in the first year of Lib, Coriantumr came up unto the land of Moron, and gave battle unto Lib. And it came to pass that he fought with Lib, in which Lib did smite upon his arm, that he was wounded. Nevertheless, the army of Coriantumr did press forward upon Lib, that he fled to the borders upon the seashore. And it came to pass that Coriantumr pursued him, and Lib gave battle unto him upon the seashore. And it came to pass that Lib did smite the army of Coriantumr, that they fled again to the wilderness of Achish. And it came to pass that Lib did pursue him until he came to the plains of Agosh. And Coriantumr had taken all the people with him, as he fled before Lib, to that quarter of the land whither he fled. And when he had come to the plains of Agosh, he gave battle unto Lib, and he smote upon him until he died. Nevertheless, the brother of Lib did come against Coriantumr in the stead thereof, and the battle became exceedingly sore, in the which Coriantumr fled again before the army of the brother of Lib. Now the name of the brother of Lib was called Shiz. And it came to pass that Shiz pursued after Coriantumr, and did overthrow many cities, and he did slay both women and children, and he did burn the cities. And there went a fear of Shiz throughout all the land, yea, a cry went forth throughout the land, who can stand before the army of Shiz? Behold, he sweepeth the earth before him. And it came to pass that the people began to flock together in armies throughout all the face of the land, and they were divided, and a part of them fled to the army of Shiz, and a part of them fled to the army of Coriantumr. And so great and lasting had been the war, and so long had been the scene of bloodshed and carnage, that the whole face of the land was covered with the bodies of the dead. And so swift and speedily was the war, that there was none left to bury the dead, but they did march forth from the shedding of blood to the shedding of blood, leaving the bodies of both men, women, and children strewn upon the face of the land, to become a prey to the worms of the flesh. And the scent thereof went forth upon the face of the land, even upon all the face of the land. Wherefore the people became troubled by day and by night because of the scent thereof. Nevertheless, Shiz did not cease to pursue Coriantumr, for he had sworn to avenge himself upon Coriantumr of the blood of his brother, who had been slain, and the word of the Lord which came to Ether, that Coriantumr should not fall by the sword. And thus we see that the Lord did visit them in the fullness of his wrath, and their wickedness and abominations had prepared a way for their everlasting destruction. And it came to pass that Shiz did pursue Coriantumr eastward, even to the borders by the seashore. And there he gave battle unto Shiz for the space of 3 days. And so terrible was the destruction among the armies of Shiz, that the people began to be frightened, and began to flee before the armies of Coriantumr. And they fled to the land of Korihor, and swept off the inhabitants before them, all them that would not join them. And they pitched their tents in the valley of Korihor, and Coriantumr pitched his tents in the valley of Shur. Now the valley of Shur was near the hill Comner. Wherefore Coriantumr did gather his armies together upon the hill Comner, and did sound a trumpet unto the armies of Shiz to invite them forth to battle. And it came to pass that they came forth, but were driven again. And they came the second time, and they were driven again the second time. And it came to pass that they came again the third time, and the battle became exceedingly sore. And it came to pass that Shiz smote upon Coriantumr, that he gave him many deep wounds. And Coriantumr, having lost his blood, fainted, and was carried away as though he were dead. Now the loss of men, women, and children on both sides was so great that Shiz commanded his people that they should not pursue the armies of Coriantumr. Wherefore they returned to their camp. The destruction of the Jaredite nation. Chapter 15. Millions of Jaredites are slain in battle. Shiz and Coriantumr assemble all the people to mortal combat. The Spirit of the Lord ceases to strive with them. The Jaredite nation is utterly destroyed. Only Coriantumr remains. Ether 15:1-3. And it came to pass, when Coriantumr had recovered of his wounds, he began to remember the words which Ether had spoken unto him. He saw that there had been slain by the sword already nearly 2 millions of his people, and he began to sorrow in his heart. Yea, there had been slain 2 millions of mighty men, and also their wives and their children. He began to repent of the evil which he had done. He began to remember the words which had been spoken by the mouth of all the prophets, and he saw them, that they were fulfilled thus far, every whit. And his soul mourned and refused to be comforted. Elder Neal A. Maxwell said, this grizzled veteran began to reflect upon the loss of 2 million of his people, and there were the beginnings of sorrow. But sorrow, which is compelled only by casualty figures, is not enough. Coriantumr's sorrow must have been the sorrowing of the damned, because he was still locked into a way of life from which he seemed unwilling to disengage fully. Ether 15:4-5. And it came to pass that he wrote an epistle unto Shiz, desiring him that he would spare the people, and he would give up the kingdom for the sake of the lives of the people. And it came to pass that when Shiz had received his epistle, he wrote an epistle unto Coriantumr, that if he would give himself up, that he might slay him with his own sword, that he would spare the lives of the people. Elder Neal A. Maxwell said, there for us to ponder also is a clear case in which personal pride and rage kept two principles from acting for the welfare of their people. Shiz insisted on getting his man, even if it meant the destruction of his own people, and Coriantumr offered his kingdom, but not his life for his people. Each said, in effect, that the ultimate object of his selfishness was non-negotiable. Neither was willing to play the role of the intervener and say of circumstances, this has gone too far, enough is enough. How often of a lesser scale in human affairs do tinier tragedies occur for want of this selfless intervention? How often do we withhold the one thing that is needed to make a difference? Ether 15:6-19. And it came to pass that the people repented not of their iniquity, and the people of Coriantumr were stirred up to anger against the people of Shiz, and the people of Shiz were stirred up to anger against the people of Coriantumr. Wherefore the people of Shiz did give battle unto the people of Coriantumr. And when Coriantumr saw that he was about to fall, he fled again before the people of Shiz. And it came to pass that he came to the waters of Ripliancum, which by interpretation is large, or to exceed all. Wherefore, when they came to these waters, they pitched their tents, and Shiz also pitched his tents near unto them. And therefore on the morrow they did come to battle. And it came to pass that they fought an exceedingly sore battle, in which Coriantumr was wounded again, and he fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that the armies of Coriantumr did press upon the armies of Shiz, that they beat them, that they caused them to flee before them, and they did flee southward, and did pitch their tents in a place which was called Ogath. And it came to pass that the army of Coriantumr did pitch their tents by the hill Ramah. And it was that same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records unto the Lord which were sacred. And it came to pass that they did gather together all the people upon all the face of the land, who had not been slain, save it was Ether. And it came to pass that Ether did behold all the things of the people, and he beheld that the people who were of Coriantumr were gathered together to the army of Coriantumr, and the people who were of Shiz were gathered together to the army of Shiz. Wherefore they were for the space of 4 years gathering together the people, that they might get all who were upon the face of the land, and that they might receive all the strength which it was possible that they could receive. And it came to pass that when they were all gathered together, every one to the army which they would, with their wives and their children, both men, women, and children, being armed with weapons of war, having shields and breastplates and headplates, and being clothed after the manner of war, they did march forth one against another to battle, and they fought all that day and conquered not. And it came to pass that when it was night, they were weary, and retired to their camps, and after they had retired to their camps, they took up a howling and a lamentation for the loss of the slain of their people. And so great were their cries, their howlings and lamentations, that they did rend the air exceedingly. And it came to pass that on the morrow they did go again to battle. And great and terrible was that day. Nevertheless, they conquered not. And when the night came again, they did rend the air with their cries and their howlings and their mournings for the loss of the slain of their people. And it came to pass that Coriantumr wrote again an epistle unto Shiz, desiring that he would not come again to battle, but that he would take the kingdom and spare the lives of the people. But behold, the Spirit of the Lord had ceased striving with them, and Satan had full power over the hearts of the people, for they were given up unto the hardness of their hearts and the blindness of their minds, that they might be destroyed. Wherefore they went again to battle. Hugh Nibley said the insane wars of the Jaredite chiefs ended in the complete annihilation of both sides, with the kings the last to go. The same thing had almost happened earlier in the days of Achish, when a civil war between him and his sons reduced the population to 30. This all seems improbable to us, but two circumstances peculiar to Asiatic warfare explain why the phenomenon is by no means without parallel. 1. Since every war is strictly a personal contest between kings, the battle must continue until one of the kings falls or is taken. 2. And yet things are so arranged that the king must be very last to fall, the whole army existing for the sole purpose of defending his person. This is clearly seen in the game of chess, in which all pieces are expendable except the king, who can never be taken. The Shah in chess, writes M.E. Moghadam, is not killed and does not die. The game is terminated when the Shah is pressed into a position from which he cannot escape. This is in line with all good traditions of chess playing, and back of it the tradition of capturing the king in war rather than slaying him whenever that could be accomplished. You will recall the many instances in the Book of Ether in which kings were kept in prison for many years but not killed. In the Code of Medieval Chivalry, taken over from Central Asia, the person of the king is sacred, and all others must perish in his defense. After the battle, the victor must do what he will with his rival, and infinitely ingenious tortures were sometimes devised for the final reckoning. But as long as the war went on, the king could not die, for whenever he would die, the war was over, no matter how strong his surviving foes. Even so, Shiz was willing to spare all of Coriantumr's subjects if he could only behead Coriantumr with his own sword. In that case, of course, the subjects would become his own. The circle of warriors, large and mighty men, as to the strength of men, that fought around their kings to the last man, represent the same ancient institution, the sacred shield wall, which our own Norse ancestors took over from Asia, and which meets us again and again in the waters of the tribes, in which on more than one occasion the king actually was the last to perish. So let no one think the final chapter of Ether is at all fanciful or overdrawn. Wars of extermination are a standard institution in the history of Asia. Coriantumr and Shiz allowed all of their followers to be killed without ending the conflict. We cannot fully comprehend the horror of the final Jaredite battle, in which even women and children were armed and sent to war. This does, however, provide a graphic picture of what people become when the Spirit of the Lord withdraws and no longer strives with them. Ether 15, 20-34. And it came to pass that they fought all that day, and when the night came, they slept upon their swords. And on the morrow they fought, even until the night came. And when the night came, they were drunken with anger, even as a man who is drunken with wine. And they slept again upon their swords. And on the morrow they fought again. And when the night came, they had all fallen by the sword, save it were 52 of the people of Coriantumr, and 69 of the people of Shiz. And it came to pass that they slept upon their swords that night. And on the morrow they fought again, and they contended in their might with their swords and with their shields all that day. And when the night came, there were 32 of the people of Shiz, and 27 of the people of Coriantumr. And it came to pass that they ate and slept, and prepared for death on the morrow. And they were large and mighty men, as to the strength of men. And it came to pass that they fought for the space of 3 hours, and they fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that when the men of Coriantumr had received sufficient strength that they could walk, they were about to flee for their lives. But behold, Shiz arose, and also his men, and he swore in his wrath that they would slay Coriantumr, or he would perish by the sword. Wherefore he did pursue them, and on the morrow he did overtake them, and they fought again with the sword. And it came to pass that when they had all fallen by the sword, save it were Coriantumr and Shiz, behold, Shiz had fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that when Coriantumr had leaned upon his sword, that he rested a little, he smote off the head of Shiz. And it came to pass that after he had smitten off the head of Shiz, that Shiz raised up on his hands and fell. And after that he had struggled for breath, he died. And it came to pass that Coriantumr fell to the earth, and became as if he had no life. And the Lord spake unto Ether, and said unto him, Go forth. And he went forth, and beheld that the words of the Lord had all been fulfilled. And he finished his record. And the 100th part I have not written, and he hid them in a manner that the people of Limhi did find them. Now the last words which were written by Ether are these: Whether the Lord will that I be translated, or that I suffer the will of the Lord in the flesh, it mattereth not. It so be that I am saved in the kingdom of God. Amen. Elder Neal A. Maxwell said Ether's great love for the people reflected a selflessness and lack of concern for his own life. Ether said, Whether the Lord will that I be translated, or that I suffer the will of the Lord in the flesh, it mattereth not, if it so be that I am saved in the kingdom of God. The willingness to die, which is born of a despair and a disdain for life, is not the same thing as Ether's courage, in which he was willing to suffer before death and then to die, if necessary, even though he loved life. We see in the book of Ether intimations that this very special prophet might have been translated, but we never do learn what actually happened to him. The silence concerning his circumstance is not unlike the disappearance of Alma the younger, of which it was written, And when Alma had done this, he departed out of the land of Zarahemla, as if to go into the land of Melech. And it came to pass that he was never heard of more. As to his death or burial we know not of. Behold, this we know, that he was a righteous man, and the saying went abroad in the church that he was taken up by the Spirit, or buried by the hand of the Lord, even as Moses. But behold, the Scripture saith the Lord took Moses unto himself, and we suppose that he has also received Alma in the Spirit unto himself. Therefore, for this cause we know nothing concerning his death and burial.